Hello friends, I'm Merlin from Foundation for Democratic Reforms, and today we have with us Dr. JP to talk about the Supreme Court verdict on the subclassification of SC and ST. Welcome, sir.
Hello, Merlin.
Sir, as you know, on Thursday, the Apex Court ruled that the subclassification for reservations is constitutionally permissible and has entrusted the states to do so. So, what are your views on this judgment, sir?
I think it's a very wise decision by the court. The court also has righted the wrong earlier they committed. I think sometime around 2010, there's a subclassification of SCs is unconstitutional. That was a very illogical judgment. If you agree that there are certain sections of population that are suffering discrimination on account of circumstances of birth, and they deserve special assistance, that's what the constitutional makers wanted, then within those sections, there are so many subcastes. There are, I think, 50 or 60 subcastes among scheduled castes, among Dalits in the country. Now, not everybody suffers the same degree of discrimination. Some are actually more backward. And there can be evidence gathered to demonstrate that economically and educationally they are genuinely more backward than the rest of the Dalit community. So it's only fair that they are given protection to the extent that they get, in proportion to their population, the quota. See, you're not doing any injustice to anybody. The Constitution prescribes, with repeated amendments, that the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes get reservations in proportion to their population. Therefore, initially, I think we were somewhere near 12 and 6% at the time of independence. Now, slowly, after the formation of the Republic, now we came to, I think, 16 and 8%. Because relatively, the growth rate of the population of SCs and STs is a little higher. But it's also tapering off. The birth rates are coming down among all sections of Indian population. The fertility rates are coming down. Therefore, over time, there will be probably stability in terms of the percentage of population of SCs and STs. But right now, it has been growing. In proportion to that, with every census, we are increasing the quota of SCs and STs. Now, within that, if certain subgroups, they are more disadvantaged, and in proportion to their population, you create a subcategory, it's perfectly reasonable and logical. You cannot have one rule that there is backwardness, therefore you give a quota, and another rule, if there is greater backwardness within that, you will not give them a special quota. It is illogical. And already among backward classes, in all the southern states, there is a practice. Take Andhra Pradesh and Telangana now. And I think the same practice obtains in Karnataka, in Tamil Nadu, in Kerala. The backward classes are divided into 4 categories: A, B, C, D. BCA is the poorest and the most disadvantaged of the backward class communities. Typically, the occupational caste. When the caste determines also the occupation, traditional occupations, they are regarded as the most disadvantaged. And then others, BCC is converted to Christianity. The Dalits converted to Christianity. So it's a rational classification. For decades we've been following that without any difficulty. So I think the court judgment is long overdue and they have righted a wrong. And they're not saying you shall do it. It's up to the state legislatures to do it, or even the union legislature in terms of the employment and educational opportunities at the national level. So the constitutional embargo earlier is now removed.
Okay, sir. So the states have been entrusted the duty and responsibility to do the subclassification. Now, considering the political circumstances in our country and within each particular state, how do you think this can influence the whole process, considering our elections and...
Let's take, say, Andhra Pradesh, where we are right now, and Telangana. The combined Andhra Pradesh state, if I'm not mistaken, has resolved unanimously in the state assembly that there should be reservations. Actually, a government at the time, I think TDP government under Mr. Chandrababu Naidu, enacted a legislation giving quota to a group of communities under scheduled castes, a special quota within the 16% in proportion to the population. The Supreme Court struck it down. Now that earlier legislation was made, and the Supreme Court has now removed that embargo because the old judgment is held invalid, they corrected it. And now that there is a resolution of the state legislature, if both the states want the same thing politically, then there is no bar. Almost certainly, Andhra Pradesh and Telangana, they will now enact a legislation to give a sub-quota for certain communities among scheduled castes. I think in many southern states that will happen. Now, northern states don't have the practice yet of even classification, subclassification of BCs. Only southern states have it. I think there will be increasing demands for subclassification among scheduled castes and BCs also on rational criteria. That means you have to gather evidence, you have to demonstrate that educationally and socially within the reserved segment of the population, they suffer a special disadvantage, therefore they require a special quota. And once you establish that, there is no legal bar, they can enact the legislation. Finally, at the national level, I see pressure coming in two ways. One, if there is indeed a greater disability suffered by a certain segment of the scheduled caste, then it applies also to the national level, whether education in union government institutions or in employment in Government of India. So it's logical that the union government will extend the same principle of subclassification among the scheduled castes and probably among the backward classes also, because the same principle applies to backward classes, and in the south of Vindhyas already backward class classification is there. So I think the country will move towards the direction of subclassification wherever it is warranted by evidence and logic.
Okay, sir. So as you said about the evidence collection, and as the states are interested, the particular state governments are interested with the duty of this collection of evidence, do you think that, as I already asked, the political circumstances within a state can directly or indirectly affect this whole process of collecting the evidence?
No, first of all, technically there is no bar because in the census we actually collect the data of all the subcastes of scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. Whereas there is no backward class census so far in the country as part of the census operation, there is a census process by which the subcastes of SCs are actually listed. They are mentioned against each other, SC, ST, whatever, the background is mentioned. So already we have the data. All you have to see is correlate that with the economic and educational background of these families. And without the rational evidence to suggest that they are actually more disadvantaged, it doesn't make any sense to subclassify. So only where it applies, they can subclassify. Technically, it's not a problem. Legally, it's not a problem. Now, politically, it's a different issue. Whether the states go in for that or not depends on the political parties in power, parties who enjoy a majority in the legislature, their perception of the political benefits and political losses. Reservation is a zero-sum game. If somebody gains, somebody else loses because the cake is only this much. So it's impossible to satisfy everybody. So what do parties do? They decide where their political base is, whom they want to attract, whether by a certain action they get more or they lose more. If they think they'll win more votes than they lose, then they'll go for that. If they feel that they're going to lose more votes than they win, then they will ignore that. That's a political decision.
Yes.
From time to time that changes because the political composition of the government changes. The social coalition support in the government also changes. So depending on who is then dominating and calling the shots, they'll go for that. That is normal politics, fairly legitimate.
So the Supreme Court verdict has also said that the creamy layer criteria can be extended to include the scheduled castes as well. So what is your take on this?
I have not studied the judgments carefully, therefore whether it is actually the majority view, whether it's a direction or not, I'm not clear. But from the initial commentary by learned people, it appears these are stray comments made by individual judges in their orders, but there is no clarity in that.
As far as I can remember, it was 4 out of 7 out of the bench, I guess.
Yes, so there are two ways of looking at it. Is it a suggestion? You may impose this criterion, or is it a direction? If it's a suggestion, then are the states willing to go? As a principle, I believe it's a reasonable case. Because what is happening in India is, ultimately, what is the logic of reservation? That there is a disadvantage suffered by virtue of circumstances of birth and upbringing, and therefore certain sections are not getting quality education and skills, and therefore there's also no earning capacity later. Therefore, reservation in educational opportunities and in employment in government are the natural corollary. That is the logic of it. Now, supposing some subgroups within these reserved communities, because of the parental advantage, suppose already the father and mother are employed in government in fairly comfortable positions with a good income. Supposing you're already in a in a profession that gives you a decent income and opportunity, like you are a medical doctor, like you are a high court advocate or something else. Supposing you already are very successful economically by virtue of entrepreneurship or business. Now, obviously, you have the capacity to take care of your children very well, guarantee quality education to them. Now, that is the logic of reservation, right? That economic advancement and opportunities help you to come out of the discrimination on account of birth. Now, if you don't agree that opportunities will reduce discrimination, then the reservation itself are illogical. What is the logic of reservation? That if we give economic and educational opportunities, discrimination, the pain of discrimination will be lessened. It will be more integrated in society. Nobody is saying caste will be eliminated overnight. That depends on society. That depends on social attitudes, marriage, because our marriages are endogamous within the caste. As long as the majority of marriages are within the caste, unfortunately, the caste identity, the notion of caste, the psychology of caste will continue to permeate our society. That is beyond the state. But the state is specially making efforts to remove some of the disadvantages educationally and economically. Now, once you no longer suffer those disadvantages because you benefit from reservation, you already have a high income, a good profession, you can take care of your children, then to claim that your children should get the benefit at the cost of the genuinely poor, disadvantaged children of parents who are illiterate or semi-illiterate or living in rural India or in urban poverty, it's not very fair, right?
Yes.
You're no longer looking at a community's backwardness. You're looking at individual advancement at the cost of the rest of the people in your own community. Therefore, I believe a genuine creamy layer is very fair, but there must be political consensus. If the court gives a categorical order, if indeed the opinion of the majority of judges on the bench is taken as a direction of the court, that's a different thing. Then it's mandatory. But if the court only gave a suggestion, then it's a political decision, a debate must be there in the country. But even if you introduce that, you have to make sure that you do it fairly. Because false certification and corruption are endemic in our society. You heard of an officer's case in Maharashtra
Yes, sir.
who got into
fake
the
certificate.
government, the IAS, under the BC quota, on the ground that our income is lower than what is prescribed by the creamy layer norms. It's a patently false certificate is what is claimed. Now, if the certification is bogus, if there is corruption there, the purpose is not served. So you must strictly enforce it. And apart from certification by the officials, because in our country, influence peddling, corruption are endemic even in certification. If you also go by the parental education, where the child lives and to which kind of a school the child has gone. Suppose you've gone to a government school. In today's India, you can reasonably say you are probably poor. Supposing you have gone to low-end private school, annual 4,000, 5,000 rupees fee, even if it's private school, you can reasonably say the family is poor. Supposing you go to a school with an annual 1 lakh rupee fee, and then you claim that you are poor, probably even if you get a certificate, it is a bogus one. It's not difficult if you have political will to really determine who deserve this, which of the candidates deserve this extra advantage. That means there must be genuine political will and a desire to enforce the norms to the benefit of the genuinely disadvantaged. In India, we are indulging in symbolism without real purpose. I think we must wake up. We can't use reservations as political tools for voting. We must actually use them as tools to enhance the capacities of the truly disadvantaged.
So, sir, in light of this judgment, and there is an ongoing call in our country for reservations in the private sector as well. So, in the light of this judgment, how do you, what is your take on this?
The courts repeatedly held it's constitutionally impermissible. See, everybody has a right to practice a profession, undertake a business or trade. It's a constitutional freedom, fundamental right. The restrictions can be imposed only to the extent that they are necessary for the common good. For instance, If anybody is allowed to become a doctor and a surgeon, the fellow is not properly trained and not certified, patients will die. Therefore, you have to regulate. Similarly, other kinds of regulations to protect the general public. But it is not the burden of the private sector to transform society. That is the burden of the state. That is the burden of our collective will. The representatives elected by us and the government constituted by them. So, first of all, it's constitutionally impermissible. But is there a way of really encouraging the private sector to give opportunity to the disadvantaged sections without compromising on the quality? After all, private sector cannot survive unless the quality and productivity are there. Even government cannot survive. But government were used to inefficiency anyway, and government has a monopoly. We don't have a substitute to government, therefore we are enduring it. The incompetence in government is unbelievable in the country, irrespective of which caste. Whether people from the so-called OCs or BCs who are there in government doesn't matter. We see generally all pervasive incompetence and corruption and inefficiency in government. That we have to improve. But private sector also behaves with corruption, inefficiency and incompetence. It's not going to help the society at all. And private sector will not survive. Why will people invest lots of money at enormous personal risk if they don't really have the capacity to enhance productivity? But what is the way to do it is utilizing the market mechanisms intelligently. What happens in the rest of the world? They do two things. A, if a class of industry or a service sector, suppose one company is able to, let's say, employ 10% of disadvantaged sections. Let's say 10% of Dalits are their employees, and they're making special efforts, and without compromising the quality and productivity, they're able to actually employ X number of people from Dalit community, let us say. In the same class of company, another company is employing only 1% or 0%. Then you make it public.
Okay.
Tell the people, the market, the consumers, if in this sector they can find 10% qualified people and they're able to employ them, why can't others do it? If they're not making conscious and deliberate efforts to give them an opportunity, if necessary, improve the skills, give them special opportunity, but do not deny them opportunity to get employment. And if they still deny, public pressure. One is the moral pressure. The second is, if market mechanisms work, you say, unless you employ that many people, I will not buy goods from you or services from you. And the moment the consumers say that, but with evidence, with integrity, then the market will respond. After all, what do they want? They want to sell more. They want to make more profit. This is what the rest of the world does. In the US and Europe, the very credible and honest civil society organizations, they keep track of employment practices. If there is overt discrimination, which can be demonstrated by evidence, then public pressure is brought to bear upon them. Sometimes the consumer pressure is brought to bear upon them. And because every business wants to succeed, do well, sell more, make more profits, they will fall in line. So there are better mechanisms to do it. You can't simply impose reservations because A, it's not constitutionally permissible, B, it will be dysfunctional. You can achieve the same objective by other means. But at the end of the day, Marilyn, reservations are just one instrument. They are not the true instrument of promoting equality. The only true instrument of promoting equality is quality school education. Quality education across the board, in particular quality school education. Now reservations are where? Only in colleges, higher education. That means you are assuming and you're actually pretending that there is good school education available to everybody, irrespective of caste and birth. It is not true in India. Only 20% of Indian children get reasonable quality school education. 80% they get substandard education. Any number of global and national surveys prove that. That means their potential is wasted early in childhood. Now, without addressing that, we're pretending that we have an answer by giving higher education reservation and employment. The child is already destroyed at the foundational level. Therefore, improving the quality of school education, guaranteeing quality to every single child, irrespective of circumstances of birth, is the heart of promoting equality. And that's one thing we ignored. India is probably the worst in the world among large countries in the quality of school education and its outcomes, and I dare say in higher education and its outcomes. We manufacture degrees and certificates. They don't mean anything in most of the cases. So the real challenge is quality school education and then quality higher education to every single child. School education universal, higher education those who aspire for it and who deserve it, but quality guaranteed. That is the way to prosperity and equality, not reservations alone. This is a temporary step which we are making permanent and pretending that's a solution without addressing the real problems.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir, for sharing your views on the
Thank you.
matter. Thank you.